After defying political gravity for years, some think the Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews might have pulled one stunt too many with last week's utterly brazen cancellation of the Commonwealth Games. Now, I hope they're right, but I'm yet to be convinced. The Games, after all, was just a cynical ploy to buy votes in regional Victoria. And having won last November, he then turned around and said that all the promised new sporting infrastructure, the pools and the stadiums, well, he said all of that would be temporary, torn down after the Games. And because of that, already the Games in Victoria were losing their lustre. And then the Premier's inability to add up, the Premier's inability to deliver anything on time or on budget. How could something cost $2 billion before the election but $7 billion afterwards when it's the same people doing the costings both times and there's a mere 6-month gap between two sets of numbers? But this is just yet another example of a Premier who seems to think that voters are fools and he can just run roughshod over them and they'll keep coming back for more.
Again, I don't want to be curt, I don't want to be blunt, but perhaps I need to be. You have been told something and you are now putting that to me.
So tell us, who was responsible for that?
No, I think we've already been there. I'm not going to respond to claims that have been made. This is quite extraordinary. There is no need for you to be machine gunning questions at me.
I might have been on leave, but I can tell you I was yelling at the TV during that press conference. And the sad thing for Victorians, this is what's happened before, hasn't it? Treat them keen, treat them mean, keep them keen, thinks the Premier, and it works. His hard left attack, well, today it kept rolling on. The latest try-on from Daniel Andrews is his so-called plan to tackle the housing crisis, which it's reported will ban Victorian landlords from increasing rents when they want and instead only allow an increase every 2 years. Now, while the bank can whack up your mortgage every month, if you're a landlord in Victoria, under Andrews, you'll just have to cop it. And then when you go to increase your rent, only every 2 years, there's talk he's going to cap how much that increase can be as well. Now, don't forget that in this country, most rental properties aren't owned by business tycoons. Australian landlords are often teachers and nurses, tradies too, people who've worked hard and ploughed their savings into what they thought would be a productive asset. Now, an iron law of economics is that controlling the price of anything inevitably reduces its supply. That's why, as the Financial Review reports this morning, up to 40% of current sales at auction are investment properties that will now no longer be available to rent. It's landlords sick of being told what they can and can't do with their own properties that are selling up. And Andrews even floated this misguided policy, even talking about it. He hasn't announced it yet, but it's certainly in the papers. That's almost going to drive people down the auction path. And should it come to pass, it'll make the inevitable rent rises, when they do come, bigger than ever. And properties even more scarce to rent, as owners sick of draconian laws, land tax hikes, all the other costs involved in having a rental property, deciding it's all too hard and the share market's a better way to save for their retirement. Now, there's no doubt there's a rental property problem in Australia at the moment. The availability of homes is reportedly the lowest in 15 years. Rents too have surged about 10% over the past 12 months. But the answer isn't to hit landlords even harder. The answer is to end the policies that are driving demand and inhibiting supply, like record migration levels, like the taxes on developments and the delay in planning approvals, like all the other expenses and regulations that are hitting landlords. Land tax hikes, as I said, making it almost impossible now to ever remove a tenant. We've seen those laws in Victoria on their way in Queensland and New South Wales as well. Things like allowing a tenant to have a dog or Rottweiler in an apartment if that's what they want, whether the landlord agrees with it or not. But what else can you expect in Victoria, where the Premier's all-powerful and the opposition far too weak?